Bonjour and welcome back. This is part 3 of a 4-part well-being workshop we've been offering to people in an effort to help them connect with their inner resources in these difficult times. My name is Sandra Sieb. I am the co-founder of Leadership Partners, an executive coaching firm in Australia. So today, I would like to talk to you about how to support your emotional well-being. But first, what do I mean by emotional well-being? What I mean is learning to create a context that is going to help you support your mood and your mental health. I like to refer to this as your emotional bubble. What kind of emotional bubble are you creating for yourself? To help you understand the context, I'd like to share a bit of a story for when this came really live for me this year, actually last year. It was February 2020. COVID was just something we started hearing about, but it was kind of really far in the background. Here in Australia, we were probably more in the mind, she'll be right. You know, this is probably not going to come here and cross the ocean. I was a bit affected because within a week, 2 people in my circle of family and friends passed away, 2 young people out of nowhere. So I was a bit shaken by this kind of, really abrupt situation. And then it was a Friday. I was going home when I got an email from my son's school saying, oh, we've had a case of COVID as a close contact. We're going to close the school and make sure everything is clean up. Don't worry, it'll be fine. But I think for me, this was just way too close, way too quickly, going from we'll be right to the next day, this is here. I have a bit of a hypochondriac self, and I lost it. I got home, I was super agitated. My husband asked me, are you okay? I'm like, no, definitely not okay. There's just too much happening at the moment. I locked myself in my study, put a candle on, and then for 2 hours, I stayed there. In silence, or I cried and I cried and I cried just to let this out of my system. And when I got out, I was like, okay, we're entering in a new era. How do I need to take care of myself and my family to make sure we stay solid, because we don't really know what's coming our way. And so this is when that's what I refer to creating an emotional bubble, is really being mindful of the kind of atmosphere you create for yourself. So to explore this concept, I think there are 3 important ideas I'd like to share with you today. The first one is understanding your stress. What is really causing stress for you? The second one is accepting your negative emotion, but not your constant rumination cycle. And I'll say more about this. And then the third one is really being proactive about creating a positive context for yourself and knowing what you can do to boost your moods. So let me start with the first part, understanding your stress. I'd like to go back to the very first question I asked you in the intro. Right now, in this moment, what is causing the most stress for you? I hope you've reflected on that question. If you haven't, I would suggest you pause the video and you give that some thought before continuing. I'd like you to really connect what is creating you the most tension for yourself at the moment. And also, why is this creating some tension for you? So let me give you some examples of some of the things we've heard lately. A lot of it, obviously, in this COVID context is around health. People are afraid for their health and for their life, whether it's because of the COVID or of the vaccine. Some people are really struggling with the juggling of homeschooling and work at the same time. The work-life balance seems to be really difficult at the moment. A lot of people are really in burnout mode, going from meeting to another. So again, there's many different ways. We all do stress in our unique way based on our unique context. And I think it's really important for you to name your context, name your stress, and understand why this is stressful for you. I'd like to run you through a couple examples. Let's take the homeschooling, for instance. A lot of parents are really struggling to juggle homeschooling and work. And often what we're hearing is how they make themselves miserable because they really feel that they're not doing a good enough job, especially on the homeschooling front. And when you push a little bit to understand what's beneath that, what's often coming up is the fear of being a bad parent, of their children being left behind, of dropping out, of not, staying on par with other kids. So it's really all those fears that amount to them often feeling, I'm letting my child down. And that's a very difficult anxiety and fear to be with. And it's important for you to name it. Because the other thing is when you name it, then you can challenge it. Are you really letting your child down? What could you do a bit differently to support your kid, but also yourself? And is it really about ticking all the boxes from what the teacher said? Or is it about connecting with them differently, having a bit more playtime so that you also enrich their life in a different way? There are lots of things you can reflect on, but the most important thing is naming your fear and understanding what's really underneath that. There's something with the concept of work-life balance and work being really intense for many people at the moment. What we're noticing is people are really reflecting on the lack of boundary at the moment between work and life. You don't have the going out to the office, coming back, so it's all one big blur. And it's really difficult to maintain boundaries. And a lot of people are experiencing burnout. So it's also important for you to understand what it is stress about. What can you do about it? Is it because you're afraid to say, hey, I can't, this is too much for me, I'm not coping? Are you afraid to look bad if you are expressing this? Are you afraid to be seen as someone who's not coping? What is the fear that you have underneath that possibly burnout that you're not talking about? As I tend to say, you can't change what you can't see. So the very first step is seeing what is making your life difficult so that you can then have some strategies around it. So that's the point on understanding your stress that I like to you to reflect on. The second part I would like to go into is really a follow through from that conversation is accepting your negative emotions and not your rumination cycle. Those two things are very different. And let me start with first the negative emotions. Very often, we don't want to feel bad. We don't like those negative emotions. We tend to push them away. But the more we push them away, the more we actually reinforce them. So, there's a lot of research that really shows it is a much more effective strategy to learn to be with your difficult emotions. There's something you need to know is that emotions are actually just, energy going through your body. And it's a sensation, it's a physiological response that lasts about 90 seconds, 90. So if you learn how to be with those 90 seconds, they will pass eventually. And I'm sure many of you are thinking, yeah, sure, when I'm triggered, I can be emotional for hours. And of course we do. But why is it? It's because we keep on fueling the emotion. We keep on adding stories and telling the same story over and over. And that's how we make the emotion much stronger and much longer. So one path of liberation from that tension is to learn to be with those difficult emotions, but to learn to be with them in a much more physical way. So there's lots of mindfulness and meditation technique that can really help you be more at peace with those emotions. But one that I really like is the one called the RAIN practice by Tara Brach. And I'll put the reference at the end of this presentation. But let me quickly walk you through it. RAIN is RAIN. The R is for realize. Realize you're having an emotion, you're having a sensation. That's the very first step. The A is for allow. Allow yourself to feel that emotion, that sensation, really feel it in your body. The I is for inquire. So the inquire is not from your mind, is really be curious. Where is this emotion located in your body? Is it in your chest? Is it in your solar plexus, in your belly? Is it in your head? We will all feel an emotion very differently, but learn to really understand where this emotion is in your body. Again, we're trying to be out of our mind, back into our body. Once you kind of locate where this emotion is, and for me, actually, I like to expand it to make it even bigger so that I can really feel it. The N is for nurture. So put what she suggests is to put your hand wherever you feel it. So if it's in your chest, just put it here and really try to soothe yourself. The minute you put your hand on your body, you activate the neural pathway that really, it's a bit like you were when you were an infant, you activate a soothing pathway. If just putting your hand doesn't really do it for you, just you can visualize this hand being from someone that you care and that you see as having a calming influence. It can be a parent, it can be a friend, whomever that you know has this calming influence on your life. If you don't feel you can be there for yourself, just imagine that hand being wherever you feel that sensation. And that, if you learn to do this over and over progressively, you will learn to be more at peace with your emotion and just let them pass. Again, so it's RAIN, realize, allow, inquire, and nurture. And Tara Brach has lots of free meditation on her website that I would really recommend you do to become more used to this practice, because it will really make a difference. So that's the part for accepting your negative emotion. But as I said, it's very different to accept your negative emotion than to accept your constant ruminating cycle. And what do I mean by ruminating, like rumination? It's just this, this monkey voice, this anxiety we have, this self-doubt, this nasty voice we can often hear and criticizing everything you do. And that tends to be in a loop and it just never stops. Trust me, if you learn to meditate a bit, you will realize there's really a very loud voice in each of our heads. And that's the part that's not healthy. It's one thing to make room for, a big intense emotion. It's another thing to constantly be with that very painful voice. And this is where you need to learn to interrupt it. At some point, you need to learn to say stop. And it actually, a very well-researched positive psychology technique called the stop technique. That's exactly doing this, is when you realize you are in this, cycle of saying the same thing to yourself over and over. The technique is about screaming top of your lungs, stop 3 times. So, usually you do in your head, but you might find it useful to do it, for real the first time. I did it once in my car on my own. And trust me, it was very powerful, because when you scream stop as loud as you can, physically, you really connect with that energy in your body so that when you need it again, you can access it. So the trick is really learning to pay attention to your inner dialogue, that when you hear it, you can interrupt it. And you have to be really strict with it. It's really like, stop, stop, stop. So that it interrupts. Again, back to the 90-second. When you do these things, you will disrupt the pattern of the emotion. And hopefully, if you do it enough, it will pass. And maybe you have to do it over and over, and that's okay. Eventually, it will work. So again, this point is about accept your difficult emotion and learn to stop to interrupt your negative thought cycle. So that's for this point. The last point I'd like to talk about is about how to create a positive context for yourself. First question I want to ask yourself is, how often are you watching the news? We know some clients, the minute they wake up, they turn the news on, and the minute they go to bed, they only turn it off when they go to bed. This is not healthy. You will be fed this constant cycle of negative news, of challenges. It's a different thing to be informed than to just be constantly hooked to the news. Not surprisingly, the people who tend to have the news on all the time report being more anxious, more angry. It's quite obvious. And I know a lot of you have already stopped watching the news and only watched it once a day, and that's a much healthier way to do. So pay attention, back to my bubble concept. What are you letting in your bubble? So the news is one thing. And then it's about being proactive, like creating positive emotion. So the first thing that comes to mind when I think of positive emotion is relationships, right? Having people in our life is really important. Relating, connecting is really important. And of course, I know that right now it can be difficult. Sometimes we only have a 5K radius and we don't have any friend in those 5K. Sometimes we're not allowed to be more than with 2 people at a time. I get that. But depending on your situation, if you have people within your 5K radius and you can go for a walk, do that. Just definitely try to connect with people. If you can't, well, as I said before, in the physical well-being, maybe just organize a call with someone when you go on a walk or something. But really think of how can you create more connection point with people. It's very easy, and especially for people who tend to be a bit more introvert, to be home and just stay home and not connect a lot with others, especially when we've been on meetings all day long. But being on meeting with your business colleague, they might be lovely. It's just not the same as connecting with friends. So how hard are you trying to really still stay in contact with your friends? So having positive relationship in your life is really important. So that's the one thing I want you to keep in the back of your mind. And then it's about really knowing what will just put a smile on your face. And sometimes it's just as simple as that. When we smile, our brain does not know the difference, whether it's a real smile or a fake smile, believe it or not. So just smiling will tell your brain, oh, he or she's in a happy mood today. And that will activate a different mechanism in your brain. So sometimes just putting a smile might make a bit of a difference. There's lots of little things you can do to boost your mood. Two of my favorite ones tend to be the gratitude practice, really connecting with what you're happy about in your life, what you can be grateful for. It can be little things like, today it's a sunny day, and that already is something good. Or just calling a friend, or just being, in good health. There's lots of little things you can do and connect with. That if you learn to do this on a regular basis in the morning or in the evening, that progressively, again, this is a very evidence-based practice that shows if you do it regularly, it will boost your mood. The last practice I would like you to try is the one I call the joy practices. And please hear me out. I know some people, when I say that, say, oh, this is really BS, it's not going to work. Why would I do that? I'm only asking you to try. If it doesn't work, you will have lost a minute to even think about this. I'd like you to reflect on what are 10 joy practices that you can do that sometime put a smile on your face. So of course, you cannot decide to feel happy. But if you know the thing that tend to put you in a good mood, you can try, and sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't. But having reflected about those joy practices will make a difference. So I'd like you to give yourself 30 seconds and really think right now, what are 10 things that when you scan your life, tend to put a smile on your face or make you laugh? Two of my favorite ones are dancing with my kids, putting some disco music and just dancing like crazy. That's definitely something. And then putting some of my teenager French music and going for a walk and singing along. So those are mine, and there are many more. There's only one rule, actually two rules with the joy practices. It can't involve things where others are always involved. You can have a couple, but not all. And it can't involve, things with a lot of food or alcohol. We want those joy practices to be healthy. And the aim is learning to connect with your inner joy and not be dependent on the context and on others to tap into that inner joy. So again, give it a go, press pause, give yourself 30 seconds and try to brainstorm what are the 10 things that I know, more or less, I've seen myself being happy with those. So please have a go and try. So that's what I wanted to share when it comes to supporting our emotional well-being. Again, naming your stress and understanding it, accepting your negative emotions and not ruminate constantly, and learning how to create a more positive emotional context for yourself. There's one last point I'd like to add that's really important. If you're not well, there are lots of services around that will support you. Here in Australia, I'm thinking of Black Dog Institute, of Beyond Blue, of Lifeline. There's lots of service you can just call and say, I'm not well. I know it's a difficult thing to do, and it can really make a difference to your life if you have the courage to make that first step. So please, if you're not well, if none of the things are enough for you, pick up the phone and call any of those lines. So this was some practices around supporting your emotional well-being. Thank you for listening. Next time we will talk about how to support your spiritual well-being. Please come back. Spiritual is not, I'm not talking about religion or cult. It's just about how to connect with a time bigger than now. So merci et à bientôt.